Good afternoon, everybody. Today, my group, Tree, Ridley, and I, will be discussing the SS Eastland Disaster, one of the deadliest tragedies in American history, yet one that many people have never heard of. We'll take you through what happened, where and when it occurred, and how a seemingly routine event turned catastrophic. We'll also dive into the ethical issues surrounding the disaster, including decisions that were made, failures in oversight, and accountability or lack of accountability that followed. Our goal is to not only inform you about this historic event, but also to spark thought about how ethics and safety play a crucial role in engineering, transportation, and policymaking. Now, for the layout of this presentation today, I'm going to hand it off to Tree to talk to you guys about the causes of this disaster, the design and responsibility of this disaster, and then we'll go to Ridley to talk about the ethical analysis and the three main issues and takeaways from this disaster.
Hi, my name is Tring Wing, and I'm the researcher for this case aboard the SS Eastland. Today, I want to take you back to a moment in history that, although lesser known than the Titanic, resulted in one of the deadliest maritime disasters in American history. I will be focusing on what happened, why it happened, and who was responsible for the decisions, both technical and administrative, that led to the disaster. But first, let's start with when and where it happened. Early on a Saturday morning, on July 24, 1915, the SS Eastland, known as the Speed Queen of the Great Lakes, was part of a fleet of 5 excursion boats assigned to take Western Electric employees, families, and friends from downtown Chicago across Lake Michigan to Michigan City, Indiana, for a day of fun and fellowship. But the Eastland, docked at the Clark Street Bridge, never left the Chicago River. Boarding began as early as 6:30, and by 7:28 a.m., the ship was fully loaded with over 2,500 passengers and crew, many of whom were standing on the upper decks. This amount of people, among a lot of other weight from the ship, caused an uneven weight distribution and eventually caused the ship to list to port, which means it leaned heavily to one side. It tipped just enough for water to flood into open gangways and portholes. Within 5 minutes, the ship rolled completely onto its side, right there, still tied to the dock, in only about 20 feet of water. Although it was close to shore, the disaster was devastating. 844 people died, including 22 entire families and over 200 children. Most were trapped below decks or crushed by shifting furniture and machinery as the ship rolled. Now let's talk about the cause. There were several contributing factors, but the immediate cause was having more weight distributed up above the ship but not below. Water began entering the ship through open portholes and gangways that were below the waterline due to the list. As more water entered, the ship became even less stable, and then it rolled over. From a technical perspective, the Eastland suffered from chronic stability issues from the moment it was built in 1903. It had a narrow hull, and its center of gravity was too high, which made it prone to listing even under normal conditions. Over the years, the flaw had been noted repeatedly by crew members, inspectors, and passengers, but the ship was still allowed to operate. The design of the Eastland was made worse when Titanic sank in 1912. The U.S. Congress passed a new law requiring all passenger ships to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board. It was an important regulation, but it didn't take into account the additional weight it might affect a ship's structural balance. This was well-meaning legislation, but it failed to account for differences in many different ship designs. The Eastland was retrofitted with extra lifeboats, rafts, and davits to comply with the law. These were mounted on the top decks, adding significant weight where the ship was already dangerously unstable. This pushed the ship's center of gravity even higher, making it extremely vulnerable to listing. Naval architects at the time warned against this, but their voices were drowned out by political and public pressure to do something after Titanic. So on July 24th, when thousands of people boarded and began to crowd the upper decks, the ship reached a critical tipping point. Even a small shift in passenger movement was enough to push it past its stability limit. So who's responsible for the flawed design? The original design of the ship came from the Jenks Shipbuilding Company in Port Huron, Michigan. From the beginning, Jenks Shipbuilding Company built the ship ignoring naval architecture principles and chose a design that prioritized speed and capacity, hence the name of Speed Queen of the Greek Lakes, over safety and stability. Over the years, the ship went through multiple ownership changes, and each one made different modifications, like expanding the upper deck and increasing passenger limits that made the ship even more unstable. None of the modifications made the ship more stable. The Western Electric Company, while not involved in the design, chose to charter the ship despite its reputation for instability. The U.S. Steamboat Inspection Service, which was responsible for approving passenger ships for operation, signed off on the Eastland, even though its inspection records showed concerns about stability. Many people, including ship engineers, crew members, and even captains, voiced concerns, but the ship remained in service. Why is that? One reason many think it was still in service was because it was profitable. The Eastland could carry over 2,500 people, making it an attractive option for large excursions like the Western Electric Picnic, which proves to be an ethical issue, potentially weighing profits over safety. Multiple investigations were launched, but despite the scale of the tragedy, no one was ever held criminally responsible. The case dragged on for years, with blame shifting from one to another. In the end, the disaster wasn't just a freak accident. It was the result of bad design, poor oversight, and well-meaning regulations applied without proper analysis.
Hello, my name is Ridley Walters, and I am a freshman student here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison studying nuclear engineering. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about the ethics related to the SS Eastlander disaster of 1915. As has been previously mentioned, the disaster was the result of the SS Eastland rolling on its side and sinking shortly after being boarded to full capacity. Today, specifically, I'm going to be talking about the ethics regarding accountability, as well as the ethics regarding design and engineering failures. To start, I will be exploring the ethical issues which arose over time regarding fault and fallout because of this disaster. As tends to be the case with major accidents like this, the first major ethical issue to arise from the disaster was that of blame. That is especially the case here, as we have to account for the loss of 844 lives. Although the court case took over 15 years to complete, ultimately the civil court found Chief Engineer Joseph Eriksson liable for the crash. This was because Joseph was found to be improperly managing the ballast tanks, which are devices used to dynamically adjust the buoyancy of the boat. The interesting fact about finding Joseph liable is the fact that he died about 3 years prior to heart-related complications, which makes him a perfect scapegoat for responsibility. Additional digging years later helped to find the true party of blame. The company who operated the SS Eastland, the St. Joseph Chicago Steamship Company, was ultimately found to be to blame. They had delayed repairs necessary for safe operation and added 40 to 74 tons to the ship just earlier that year, most of which had been added to higher up portions of the ship, which increased the potential of buoyancy issues. The changes that I am describing were an increase in lifeboat quantity mostly, which, while you could argue that this was done in preparation for some incoming laws passed due to the Titanic issue, which had happened just a few years prior, the company was issued a warning by the vice president of the Detroit and Cleveland Navigation Company. This warning was that the changes they sought to make could cause, again, buoyancy issues, likely causing a Great Lakes ship such as it was to capsize. Even prior to these issues, though, the ship had 2 other instances of nearly capsizing. Pattern was ignored by its company, and as we can see, the ship was kept in operation. This was all done in the pursuit of profit by the company, causing this to be a highly unethical practice. Now I'd like to discuss some of the design and engineering failures that may have contributed to this disaster. Put plainly, sources describe the boat as being poorly built. You could very well call into question the ethics of an unqualified person designing the boat itself, right? Well, that is unfortunately the case here. The The design of the SS Eastland can be credited to Sidney Grant Jenks. During initial proceedings, Jenks has been cited to have gone back to his naval design professor for assistance designing the ship. The SS Eastland was also the first and only passenger ship designed by its production company. This lack of experience and qualification as well for a large boat such as the SS Eastland is questionable for sure, but so too is the issue of design being different than the final product. The boat was designed to be able to cruise at 20 knots, but was only able to reach up to 19 knots. Also, the shipyard reduced the length of the ship by about 60 feet and added additional decks for passenger capacity when compared to its initial design specifications. In conclusion, as engineers, we must hold ourselves to an incredibly high standard in order to best preserve human life, while failure to do this, as we can see with the SS Eastlander tragedy, can be catastrophic. Thank you for listening.
Overall, the SS Eastland disaster was more than just a tragic accident. It was a result of overlooked safety concerns, poor design making, and failure to prioritize human lives. By examining what happened, where, when, and how, we've seen how quickly things can go wrong when ethics and responsibility are just ignored. This tragedy serves as a powerful reminder to the importance of accountability, proper regulation, and ethical standards in engineering and public safety. Although over 800 lives were lost that day, understanding the SS Eastland disaster helps ensure that the story isn't forgotten and the lessons are learned to prevent future tragedies. Thank you for listening.